From all the tombs built by kings, and from all the treasures buried by ancient civilizations, there is one secret that seems stranger than fiction itself. Imagine an emperor ordering the construction of an entire army, not to fight in this world, but to accompany him into the next. An army comprising not dozens, nor hundreds, but thousands of soldiers standing in endless rows, each one bearing a different face, unique features, and a gaze that still seems alive after more than 2,000 years. And stranger still, this army was no myth, nor a tale from works of fantasy. It was a reality buried underground in utter silence for more than 22 centuries. No sounds, no movement, no witnesses. Just thousands of warriors waiting in the darkness. So, who was the man who commanded the making of this immense army? And why did he spend the wealth of an entire empire to bury thousands of soldiers with him? What is the secret that still makes scientists refuse to open his main tomb to this day? Are there priceless treasures hidden in its depths? Or is there something more dangerous than gold itself? This is the story of the Terracotta Army. The greatest army that never fought a war, the largest personal guard in human history, and the enigma still buried with the first emperor who unified China. His name was Qin Shi Huang, the man who changed the course of Chinese history forever. Before his birth, China was a land torn apart by warring kingdoms, bleeding in endless conflicts, where thousands fell every year. But this boy, born a prince in the kingdom of Qin, carried a dream far greater than being a king. He wanted to become the first emperor of all China. And when he came of age, his military campaigns began, campaigns that would alter the face of Asia. His army swept through the kingdoms one after another, and with every victory, the dream of unity drew closer, until after years of blood and battles, the man stood atop the greatest empire China had ever known. But the strange thing was that the man who subdued kings and defeated armies feared an enemy he could not conquer, death. The more his empire expanded, the more his fear of the end grew, for wealth cannot prevent death, armies cannot stop time, and power cannot defeat mortality. And from here began one of the strangest projects in human history. The emperor ordered the construction of a mausoleum unlike any other. It was not merely a tomb, but an entire world rebuilt beneath the earth, palaces, corridors, storerooms, weapons, war chariots, and above all else, an army of unbelievable scale. Historical records say that tens of thousands of laborers and craftsmen spent long years building this colossal funerary complex, for while the empire lived above ground, another city was being built in secret beneath the soil. A city for the dead. But the matter did not stop at constructing the tomb, for the emperor wanted an eternal guard that would remain with him after his passing, just as they were with him in life, and thus the idea of the Terracotta Army was born. Thousands of soldiers made of fired clay, archers, infantrymen, cavalrymen, military commanders, a complete army in every detail, as if the emperor was preparing for a war in another world unknown to any. And what is even more astonishing is that the craftsmen did not produce identical copies. When scientists look at the faces of the soldiers today, they find bewildering variations. Some appear young, others seasoned. There are angry faces, calm ones, and others that seem to conceal an inner anxiety. It is as if each soldier was a real person frozen in a single moment of his life. If you were to look at the Terracotta Army from afar, you might think you are before thousands of similar statues, but the closer you get, this impression begins to collapse, for the faces are different, the hairstyles vary, and the expressions seem to belong to real individuals. When researchers began to study the statues closely, they discovered that it was not merely an artistic endeavor, but a complex production system resembling modern assembly lines. The bodies were made in separate parts, the legs in one place, the torsos in another, the heads in specialized workshops. then the pieces would be assembled at the end, with the craftsman carving the individual details onto each face, making the project combine mass production and individual artistry at the same time. Yet the greatest surprise was not in the statues themselves, but in the weapons they were carrying. When spears, swords, and arrowheads were found, scientists were astonished, for some of these weapons remained in excellent condition, as if they were made just days ago. In some pits, researchers found hundreds of weapons arranged like a military storehouse ready to mobilize at any moment. The Terracotta Army was not merely funerary decoration, it was a complete replica of the emperor's real army. And the deeper the scientists delved into studying the site, a chilling truth began to emerge: the army that was discovered is but a small part of a massive complex stretching over vast areas underground, and at the heart of this complex lies the true target, the emperor's tomb itself, a tomb that has not been opened to this day, and which ancient historians say conceals secrets beyond imagination. It would have been possible for the emperor to be satisfied with the Terracotta Army, but Qin Shi Huang would not settle for an ordinary tomb. He wanted to rebuild his empire once more beneath the earth. According to the ancient Chinese historian Sima Qian, who wrote decades after the emperor's death, what lies beneath the great earthen mound is not merely a tomb, but a miniature world of all China, to the extent that the historical texts mention something legendary: rivers of mercury. The accounts say that craftsmen created rivers and seas representing the great rivers of China, making mercury flow within them as if it were real water, and for centuries many considered this story a mere myth. But when researchers conducted modern measurements in the area surrounding the mausoleum, they discovered elevated levels of mercury in the soil, far higher than the natural average, and suddenly the legend became less fantastic than it was thought to be. However, here arises the strangest question: if scientists know the location of the tomb, why do they not open it? The answer lies in a fear of a different kind, for researchers know that opening the tomb chamber could destroy things that only reached us because they remained sealed for all these centuries. The outside air could damage colors, organic materials, and find traces in moments, and there are other concerns related to mercury and materials that might still be present inside. And thus, Qin Shi Huang remains in his place for more than 22 centuries, guarded by thousands of warriors who have not blinked their eyes for even a single moment. Qin Shi Huang did not fear death as ordinary people do, rather, he wanted actual immortality. As he advanced in age, this obsession turned into a genuine mania. He dispatched expeditions to the far reaches of the seas in search of the elixir of life, and summoned diviners and priests from across his empire. In a bitter irony of history, the remedies promised to grant immortality may have been the very thing that hastened his end, for some historians believe he ingested compounds containing mercury, which was thought at that time to prolong life, but we know today that it is a dangerous poison. In the year 210 BC, during a long tour, the man who unified China died, but even his death was not ordinary. The close advisors concealed his passing from the army and officials fearing chaos, and they continued traveling with his carriage as if he were still alive, and as the body began to decompose, carts filled with salted fish were placed around the procession to mask the smell. Thus, the most powerful man in China traveled for days after his death without most of those around him knowing. And when the news finally broke, the empire began to shake, and his ruling dynasty could not survive for long. Only a few years later it fell, and much of what he built disintegrated. Yet one thing remained beneath the ground in the darkness: the army, thousands of soldiers who did not witness the fall of the empire, and never learned that the master for whom they were made had finally lost the only battle he could not win, the battle against death. The years passed, then the decades, then the centuries. Ruling houses changed, dynasties fell and others rose, and atop the great mound, people farmed and built without knowing that beneath their feet lay one of the world's greatest secrets. Meanwhile, in the depths, The army waited in a silence that lasted for more than 2 millennia, but this silence was not complete. Evidence suggests that parts of the army were subjected to destruction shortly after the emperor's death. Some pits showed signs of massive fires, and others contained shattered statues and collapsed ceilings. Many historians believe that the rebellions that swept China after the fall of the Qin dynasty reached the site, with the real weapons buried, with the army being looted, and fires set in the wooden structures that covered the pits. But something astonishing happened. Instead of the army disappearing forever, the soil and rubble protected it. With the collapse of the roofs and the accumulation of debris, the statues were gradually buried in an environment that helped preserve them for long centuries, and thus, the destruction itself became the reason for the army's survival. Then came the year 1974, when a single blow from a pickaxe was enough to begin the greatest archaeological discovery of the modern era. When the archaeologists arrived, they did not expect what they would see. As layers of soil were removed, pottery heads appeared, then shoulders, then entire rows of warriors, and as the excavations expanded, the amazement grew. Thousands of soldiers, hundreds of horses, war chariots, real weapons, as if an entire army had frozen in a moment of time and then reappeared after 22 centuries. The discovery was not merely the addition of a new archaeological site. From the moment scientists saw the first rows, they realized they were before something capable of rewriting the history of ancient China. If ancient historians had exaggerated in describing the greatness of the emperor, reality showed that the truth was even greater. But the site did not reveal power alone, it revealed the human element. When researchers studied the statues closely, they began to see tiny details carrying the fingerprint of a nameless individual, making the army a silent testimony to the lives of the thousands of craftsmen who spent years of their lives on this grand project. And with the development of technology, new secrets began to emerge. Examination showed that the statues were covered in vibrant colors, but these colors vanished within hours of their exposure to air, and here scientists understood another reason for not opening the main tomb. Some secrets can be lost the very moment we uncover them. So, after more than 22 centuries, these warriors still stand in their rows, staring straight ahead, as if awaiting an order that will never come. And perhaps herein lies the true secret of the Terracotta Army. That it was not made solely to guard a dead emperor, but to remind all of humanity that the greatest of kings, the mightiest of armies, and the vastest of empires, all depart in the end, while history remains.